Hello and welcome everyone to the Learning RPA with UiPath session. In today's session, we are going to look at one of the interesting problems, that is to create a process that accepts two double values as input and calculates their sum and displays the result as the output. So one more condition is that in the project there must be two workflows. One of them is calculate sum, which explicitly calculates the sum of two double values, and then there is a main workflow through which we are going to get the user input and pass it on to calculate sum sequence. So we should have two sequences, one is the main sequence and the calculate sum sequence, through which we should be able to solve this problem. Okay, so let us go to the UiPath Studio. So here is a project that I have created. So I have a sequence. So let me go to the activities panel, and first thing that I should do in the main sequence is to get two double values as the user input. So let us use input dialog. So I'm going to drag and drop input dialog. I'll just rename the activity as first. Okay, and let us configure the dialog title. Here I'll say first number. Okay, and then let us give the label. Here I'll say enter the first number. Okay, and then input type be text box, and the value entered must be stored in one of the variables. So for that, let us go to the variables panel and create two variables so that we can store the two input values given by the user. Okay, and then the variable type we're going to change it to system.double. Okay, same as first variable, let us create one more, that is second, and also set its variable type to system.double. Okay, fine. So let us use those variables in these input dialog boxes. So for the first input dialog box, I'm going to use the first variable that I have created. Okay, and then let us use one more input dialog box right below this. I'm just gonna drag and drop it, and let us configure this. Let us rename this input dialog as second. Okay, and let's give the title for this. Here I'll say second number. Okay, and let us configure the label. Here I'll say enter the second number. Okay, and let it be text box with respect to input type, and the value entered must be stored in one of the variables. So let us use this one more variable, which is second, in this particular input dialog box. Okay, so now we have two inputs from the user, first and second. Okay, so now we should be able to configure the other sequence through which we can find out the sum. Okay, so let us create a new sequence, and here I'll say calculate sum. Okay, and a new sequence is created. Okay, so in order to get the values from the main sequence, because we are getting the user inputs in the main sequence, and we should get it inside the calculate sum sequence. So in order to get these two values, we should be making use of arguments. Okay, so first of all, let us drag the sequence. Okay, and let's go to the arguments panel to create two arguments. We need to create arguments because we want to capture the values which are received in main sequence. Okay, so let us first create the arguments. I'm just going to say in first. okay, because we are trying to get the values in this particular workflow. That's why in underscore first is the name that I'm going to give for the arguments, and the direction be in, and let us change the argument type to system dot double, because we are dealing with double numbers. Okay, so there are different types of directions: in out, in slash out, and then property. Okay, so let us stick to in direction because we are trying to get in the values from the other sequence. Okay, similarly, let us create one more argument in underscore second. Okay, and let us also change the argument type to system dot double, and let the direction be in. Okay, so let us use these two arguments to calculate the sum, because these are the two arguments which are going to hold on to the values passed by the main sequence. Okay, so let us configure the right hand side of the assign activity. Okay, so here I'll say in first plus in second. Okay, that's how I'm going to add the two values. Okay, and then I should have a variable in which I can store the sum of these two values. Correct. So what I'll do, I'll go to variables panel and then create a variable now, say output. Okay, and let its type also be system dot double. Okay, and let me use that variable here to store the sum that is calculated. Okay, so let us save the workflow. Okay, and then ultimately what we should do is we should simply be displaying the sum. Okay, so for that purpose I am using message box. Okay, so let us configure the message box. Here I'll say the sum is, and then plus output. Okay, output dot toString, because output is of type double, so that we should be able to convert it into string, because we are trying to concatenate here. So I'm just going to make it output dot toString. Okay, so this is the second sequence that we should configure. Okay, so now if we come back to the main workflow, now we have two input dialog boxes through which we are receiving the user input. Now we should be able to pass these two values to calculate sum. So in order to do that, we should be making use of one more activity called as invoke workflow activity. Okay, okay, invoke workflow file activity. I'm just gonna drag and drop this right after the first and second dialog boxes. Okay, so this we should configure to pass on the values from main sequence to calculate sum sequence. Okay, so I'm just going to select which workflow file that I want to send. So calculate sum.xaml is the workflow. Okay, and the arguments automatically it has read as two items, because in the calculate sum we have configured two indirected arguments. That's why it is showing two items in the dictionary. So just say import arguments, and then if you click on this icon, you should be able to see the first and the second arguments that are created in the calculate sum sequence. Okay, since we have selected that workflow, it is showing these two arguments which are created there. Okay, and let us define the values for these things, which is first and then the second. Okay, so first and second are going to contain the values which are given by the user. Those are going to be passed as arguments in the form of in underscore first and in underscore second. Okay, so yeah, so this is how we do it. So let us save the entire sequence and then run this. Okay, so it is compiling the activities. So first of all, it is going to gather two input values in terms of double, and then pass it on to calculate sum workflow. It is going to calculate the sum of those two values and then displays the result. Okay, so now we got the dialog box. So let us say 23.45, and let us give second value as say 56.87. Okay, and press OK. and ultimately it is going to display the sum is 80.32. Okay, so this is how we're going to deal with the arguments, indirected arguments. Okay, so this is how we pass the values with the help of invoke workflow file activity. Thank you for watching. If you like the video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more such videos.